5 young ladies, one mission: to make 1996 the year of girl power.
30 years ago this week, a girl group nobody had heard of released a song that took half an hour to write. It went to number 1 in more than 30 countries, and according to the largest study of its kind ever conducted, it's still the catchiest piece of music in the past 60 years. The story of Wannabe isn't really the story of a smash. It's the story of a record the label thought was a mess. A mix war the girls had to win twice, and 30 minutes in a box room in Shoreditch that quietly changed who pop music was for. I was 12 that summer, and I can tell you, it changed who it was for in ways nobody in that room could have guessed. In March 1994, a management company placed an advert in The Stage asking for young women who were street smart, extrovert, and ambitious. The 5 who survived the auditions were put in a house in Maidenhead, and in December 1994, showcased for industry writers and producers at No Miss Studios. The forced account of what happened next is in David Sinclair's book on the group, a book I've been reading for 20 years, and the source for a lot of what follows in this video. Songwriter Richard Biff Stannard wasn't even there for them. He'd come to meet Jason Donovan, and when Mel B came charging across the corridor, his honest reaction was that she seemed mad and that he needed to find out more. He stayed long after everyone else left, then reported back to his writing partner Matt Rowe that he'd found the pop group of their dreams. The first session happened in January 1995 at the Strong Room Studios on Curtin Road in Shoreditch, a room so small that when Rowe met them, all 5 girls were sitting on one chair, stacked on each other's laps, just firing questions at him. I love that detail more every time I read it because the whole record is in it before a single note even exists. The first thing they wrote together was a slow, soulful number called Feed Your Love. Shelved for being a bit too adult for the audience version would have in mind. So the girls asked for something up-tempo. Rose set a loop running on his MPC 3000 drum machine, and Stannard's writing method is worth knowing here. He pictures a new act walking through their own video, arriving with a bit of arrogance, and the strut of that loop put him in mind of Travolta in Grease. You're the one that I want. That tells you rather a lot about the DNA of Wannabe and what came next. What followed wasn't songwriting in any traditional sense. The girls threw out chants, raps, melodies with no thought for verse or chorus, and Rowe stitched the pieces together the way that he'd been assembling dance remixes. His word for it was higgledy-piggledy. The core of the song came together in about half an hour. Mel B called it a sudden creative frenzy, and Geri's memory is that everyone in the room knew right then that this was the one.
It was so unique. It was like nothing you'd ever heard before. Just like, that is our first single. That is it.
2 months later, the girls fled the house in Maidenhead, taking their demos with them.
I remember packing all our stuff up in these bin liners and quickly put it in my car, just doing a bunk.
And they now had the song that made them worth fighting over. And they knew it. In Victoria's words, Wannabe became their calling card. They'd sneak the tape into a record company's sound system, burst into the office, and perform it on the desks and chairs while executives sat there stunned. They weren't auditioning for the industry. The industry was auditioning for them. If you're anything like me, you've sung along to the song thousands of times, which makes it easy to miss what the words are up to. But Wannabe inverts the love song. 30 years of pop convention said the singer pleads and the lover decides. And this song flips that on its head entirely. She sets the terms, and the terms aren't up for discussion. If you want her, you go through her friends first.
There were so many songs out there and they've all got the same message. We wanted to say something different.
And that's a genuinely radical thing to smuggle into a debut single aimed at teenage girls, and no marketing department engineered it. Stannard has said his only plan was to capture the essence of what the group was, and the lyric came out of hours of the 5 of them talking over each other about boys and ambition and loyalty. Girl power, the phrase, arrived later. Girl power, the idea, is sitting fully formed in the chorus contract. Make it last forever, friendship never ends. And that contract wasn't only being signed by teenage girls. It landed just as squarely on some of the boys singing along. The ones for whom a promise built on friendship rather than romance made a kind of sense we couldn't have explained at the time. And notice the writing is chant first. These aren't lines written for one voice to interpret. They're lines built for 5 voices to declare. And as it turned out, for every playground in Britain to shout back. I can confirm that firsthand because I was standing in one of them. By every rule of 1996 pop construction, this song is built wrong. It opens with laughter and footsteps instead of a strong instrumental hook. The chorus arrives almost immediately. There's a rap section part near the end of the mainstream pop single. The whole thing is done in 2 minutes and 53 seconds, and it sounds less like a record that was made than a party you've walked in on halfway through, which, as we'll get to, is more or less what this song is. Then there's the science.
Here comes the science bit. Concentrate.
In 2014, a computational musicologist at the University of Amsterdam, working with Manchester's Museum of Science and Industry, ran an experiment called Hooked on Music. More than 12,000 participants tested on how fast they could recognize hit songs going all the way back to the 1940s. The average song took 5 seconds to identify. Wannabe took 2.3 seconds. It beat Mambo No. 5. It beat Eye of the Tiger. It beat everything Michael Jackson, Whitney Houston, and ABBA ever released. Catchiest song of the modern pop era isn't a Beatles record or a Motown classic. It's Wannabe by the Spice Girls. Why? Because the hooks are chants. The melodic material is narrow, rhythmic, and pitched where any untrained voice can land it. Your brain doesn't have to reach for Wannabe. It's lodged itself right in there as soon as you heard it. And none of that is fluke. The song is this sticky because it was written the way you hear it. 5 people shouting over a simple loop until the best bits stuck, and a producer wise enough to keep all of it in there. The entire instrumental is Rowe and Stannard's keyboards and drum programming, and everything else on that record is the 5 girls we came to know and love. The production choice that matters most, though, is what didn't get cleaned up. The girls recorded their vocals together, crammed into that small room, and the chatter and laughter stayed on the track. Those footsteps that open the song, the first sound on their entire debut album, and Mel B running up to a microphone. That was the only thing they added afterwards. The record is a document of its own making. And now my favorite part of this whole story, the mix war, and I've read every account of it I can find. Ashley Newton, Virgin's head of A&R, that's artist and repertoire, couldn't stop tinkering with the track. That's Geri's word, and she meant it as an accusation. And in Sinclair's book, Newton pushes back on it, saying tinkering is the wrong word, that he was involved and committed and caring, always wanting them to chase the best pop record they could possibly make. But both things can be true, and that's what makes this chapter of the story so good. Newton had a passion for R&B, so he sent Wannabe to an American mixer called Dave Way, a man with a reputation for R&B and swing. The label heard the strangest, most British pop record of the decade and tried to make it sound like an American R&B record. Geri's verdict on the result was, quote, bloody awful. It no longer sounded like pop, and it no longer sounded like them. Then came jungle mixes, hip-hop mixes, a version she describes as sounding almost West Coast. The arguments raged until Geri and Mel B simply took over and dictated what the final mix would be. And what they demanded, in essence, was their demo back, just with the tinniness taken out. The man who delivered it was Mark Spike Stent, an engineer who'd worked with Depeche Mode and Massive Attack and who took the job while in Ireland working with U2. Stent heard Wannabe as a weird pop record that sounded like nothing else around, and rather than fixing that, he protected it. 6 hours of tightening it up and pushing those 5 voices right to the front of the mix. So the mix that conquered the planet isn't a producer's rescue job. It's the sound of the room being put back into its place. Here's the bit almost nobody clocks, though. Both roads not taken are still out there. The original mix, the one the label heard and called lackluster, essentially the demo the girls fell in love with, is the version playing in Spiceworld the movie, in the cafe scene where they perform Wannabe over a beatbox. It's been hidden in plain sight in their own film for nearly 30 years. And the Dave Way mix got a quiet official life of its own tucked onto the UK maxi single in July 1996. 1996 and dusted off again for the Spice 25th anniversary edition. And go and listen to both back to back with the single and you'll hear exactly what the girls were fighting for. The label instinct was to sand the strangeness off the record, when the strangeness was the entire point. And the girls knew that. Standard has compared it to a punk record, and honestly, he's right. 5 voices, and the smartest decision on this record is refusing to blend them. Where an American girl group of the era would stack harmonies onto one polished instrument, Wannabe hands the lead around like a relay baton. Mel B and Geri driving the rap, Emma's brightness set against Mel C's power, every handover audible. You could hear 5 different women on this record, and that's the whole idea of the Spice Girls. Song. Who takes which line does the job a music video usually has to do. But with one listen, you could pick your Spice Girl. And everyone did pick. That was the ritual of the entire year in every classroom and every friendship group. And being a boy, you got no exemption from it, trust me. Sometimes I had to be the arbiter of who was which Spice Girl. Except the vocal casting hides a genuinely sad story, and it comes from Victoria herself in Learning to Fly, a book I've read cover to cover more than once, and this passage gets me every time. The song was half finished when the session rolled into the weekend and Victoria wasn't there. There are 2 conflicting versions of events. One is a wedding, one she was sick. The girls kept her posted over the phone on those enormous mid-90s mobiles, and her own words are the wound. Hearing it down the phone is not the same, and she couldn't bear not being there because whatever anyone said about it not mattering, it mattered. She could already tell the song was perfect and that it was them, and by the time it came to recording, every part had been divided among the other 4. She's on backing vocals, but very little else, and it's the origin of the tag that had followed Posh for 30 years. Posh Spice, the one who doesn't sing, and it traces back to nothing more sinister than one missed weekend in the studio. On the most famous recording of her life, the thing you can't hear is her. It's also why the record feels like a gang rather than an act. The vocals were cut together in that room, not pieced together line by line in isolation, and the scenes are showing on purpose because chasing vocal perfection would have killed the magic of Wannabe. Remember what the industry believed in early 1996? Take That had just disbanded, and the consensus was that no girl group could fill the gap. Warner had passed on them saying exactly that, and Kate Thornton, who was then editing Top of the Pops magazine, said flatly that it would never happen for them. Even inside their own camp, the debut single was a fight, and Geri's telling of it in If Only is one of the great passages of any pop autobiography. She describes being the only girl in Simon Fuller's office while he and 2 Virgin A&R men worked on her. First singles tend to disappear, they said. You want something more mainstream, something less radical. And the label's preferred candidate was a different track, Love Thing or Say You'll Be There. Geri left, rang the other girls one by one from a phone box down the road and got the same answer from every single one of them, and went back in to tell Fuller the decision was not up for negotiation.
That is our first single. That is it.
Wannabe was the single. Both battles the girls fought, the mix and the single choice, they won. And both times, they were right. Whenever anyone tells you the Spice Girls were a manufactured act with no say in their own music, send them a link to this video. And then came the iconic music video. Johann Kamitz had never made a music video. He was hired off of his Volkswagen and Nike commercials, and the concept was the group's own origin story. Recreate the way they used to storm record company offices, this time through a stuffy bohemian party. The Barcelona building that was originally planned to be the set fell through 5 days before the shoot. So it moved to the old Midland Grand Hotel at St. Pancras, dressed as a decaying mansion, filmed overnight in the freezing cold. Geri, in a £20 secondhand showgirl leotard from Notting Hill Market and towering platform shoes she could barely stand in, spent the night falling over while the director yelled himself hoarse. And here's her confession, sitting in If Only for anyone who's read it. The famous single continuous take is actually 2 takes, synchronized and camouflaged so perfectly that no one could tell. The label was horrified by the finished video and floated a reshoot. Over £100,000 in, Geri refused point blank, warts and all, because ultimately they'd be the ones paying for it. Newton argued against the video too, and later admitted that the girl's instincts had been absolutely right, and he didn't have to wait long to find out. The video went to The Box, which is the UK's viewer request channel, or was back then, and hit #1 on the request chart within 2 hours of first going on air, and it sat there for 13 weeks. And if you were anywhere near a telly with cable that summer, you knew it wasn't so much a rotation as it was on constant loop. The single entered the UK charts at number 3. The girls on a picnic rug with champagne, listening to the countdown on Capitol.
It was 14th of July 1996. Okay, and this was taken in my sister's back garden. Wannabe had gone to number 3. It was just gone in. And it was on a Sunday afternoon, and we cracked open a bottle of bubbly, and so we were doing like, yeah, it went to number 3. We were so excited by it.
And then it went up, deposing Geri Barlow, the man whose old band's collapse had supposedly left a gap no girl group could fill, and it stayed at number 1 for 7 weeks.
We're number 1! See us later on Top of the Pops!
7 Sunday evenings in a row with the radio on, and the answer at the top never changed. The news reached the girls in a Tokyo hotel room mid-promo tour when their PA walked in with a message from Fuller, crack open a bottle of champagne. Mel B ordered the champagne and declared the 8 o'clock start irrelevant. And here's the detail that appears in both If Only and Learning to Fly. 2 women describing the same night in 2 separate books. It was the greatest moment of their lives, and they both spent part of it wanting to go home. Victoria sat alone in her room afterwards, phoned her parents' barbecue back in England, listened to a celebration happening without her, and cried. That's what this song cost, at the exact moment that it paid off. By early 1997, Wannabe had spent 4 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100, something British pop acts had to spend a decade failing to do, on its way to topping the chart in more than 30 countries. And the skeptics came round one by one. Thornton declared it the best pop record of 1996. Chris Evans, who'd once caught them performing at Radio 1 and mouthed through the glass that they should crawl back to children's TV, found them at a club after the run at number 1, shook their hands, and admitted that he'd been wrong. The reviews at the time were mixed. The following year, the song took the Ivor Novello for Best British Written Single and the Brit Award for British Single of the Year. The critics called it a novelty, but the novelty outlasted the critics. I can tell you exactly where I was. Summer of 96, my friend's bedroom. I'd run back in to grab something before we were going to play outside, and Wannabe and his radio was still on. I'd never seen those 5 women, and I didn't know a single one of their names. And I stood there, whatever we were rushing off to do, completely forgotten, because the energy coming out of that radio made me want to know everything about them and hear everything they had. And I was only 12. I didn't have the language for why 5 loud women taking up space in a room felt less like a pop song and more like permission. Plenty of us didn't and wouldn't for years. 30 years on, I've read every book these women wrote about that time, and I'm still finding things in this song to love and enjoy. And what nobody clocked at the time is that Wannabe moved pop's center of gravity. It put teenage girls, their friendships, their terms, and their volume at the front of the frame, rather than casting them as the audience for someone else's fantasy. The wave of pop that followed, from the girl groups to the solo women who run the charts today, operates in territory this record opened up. It's worth remembering these 5 young women were written off at the time as a gimmick, but every single thing I've spoken about in this video so far really proves all of that wrong. A lyric that flips the love song power balance, a tune measured scientifically as the stickiest ever tested, a production that kept the laughter in, 5 voices arranged to stay 5 voices. Pure joy, bottled. And behind all of it, a group that fought their own label twice over the mix and over the right for it to be a single. And they were correct both times. They deserve to be spoken about the way we speak about anyone who changed the sound of a decade. And on this channel, they always will be. Everything on this record points the same way. It's a song about the room it was made in, so it was capturing their energy, and that's why it only took 30 minutes to write, and it's why 30 years on, 2.3 seconds is all it needs to be recognized as excellent. The Spice album this song launched turns 30 in November, and it's obviously going to get the full deep dive treatment on this channel, so hit subscribe so you don't miss it when it drops. Until then, that's what made it, that's why it worked. You just had to be there.